The minor league season is here, and on today's show, I'm breaking down where all the Rangers' top prospects are at each different level and the biggest storylines for each team and what you need to watch for the Rangers' prospects this season. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to the Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan since 2010, the founder and host for all 5 seasons of this Locked On Rangers podcast. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Subscribe on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. On today's show, we are getting into the rosters. This minor league season kind of snuck up on me. It's been kind of a chaotic last couple of weeks, but it is here. It is finally here. We had opening night last night. I'm not going to talk too much about the games, mainly because most of the starting pitching that I was hoping to have great breakout games was kind of a little disappointing, especially a rough go for young Brock Porter in his first professional start. But we are going to start at the top of this system because the top of this system is fully loaded. Actually, really all of these affiliates have some really interesting guys to look out for. We are going to start with AAA, then make our way down in descending order. But AAA has normally not been the place for the most of the Rangers' top prospects. It's been a place that was overlooked, but as the gap has been widening between minor league baseball and major league baseball, it's been used a little bit more efficiently. There's been a lot more top prospects that are spending significant time there, and so the Rangers have a pretty decent crew in AAA to start the season. We're going to go from my top 30, not anybody else's top 30, because this is my podcast. So, of course, if you want to go listen to those top 30 prospect podcasts, talk more about what to expect from these guys, what I'm hoping for. I'll do a little link for them in the YouTube show. And if you're listening to this on audio, then you're just going to have to scroll a little bit of ways. I think it was in January when I did those shows. But anyway, starting in AAA, we have Justin Foskey, my number 10 overall prospect, who is there, along with the number 11 prospect, Cole Winn, the right-handed pitcher. The crafty lefty from Baylor and Alito, Cody Bradford, comes in at 15. He is on the AAA roster as well. Jonathan Ornelas, the switch, do everything, the Swiss Army knife, not the switch anything, right-handed hitter, but a guy who plays center field and plays shortstop and plays pretty much everywhere and does a really good job of it. Took a huge step forward last year. He is my number 19 prospect. He is in AAA Round Rock to start the season, as well as my number 24 prospect, Zach Kent, a right-handed starter who made his AAA debut last year, did very well in a short sample size there. A rough start to the season for Zach Kent last year in AA, figured it out down the stretch and made a promotion to AAA where he absolutely thrived. And Yerry Rodriguez closes it off, the right-handed reliever, in his third option year. So we will see if we get to have more Major League Yerry Rodriguez. We got just one inning of Major League Yerry Rodriguez. He's my number 27 prospect. That is 6 total guys of the top 30 on this AAA roster. The most interesting non-top 30 guy, usually there's a lot of interesting non-top 30 guys in AAA, just guys who are like, maybe this guy will probably make an impact on the big league team, but I think it's Sam Huff. It's got to be. He was a late snub in my top 30. I kind of thought about having there at the bottom. It's been a little bit of a weird go for him. They also have Sandy Leone, who was signed to a minor league deal after he was cut and then re-signed to a minor league deal. If the Rangers need some defensive help, if Mitch Garver is injured or if Jonah Heim is injured and they need a backup catcher, I think that Leone might be the first call over Sam Huff. Maybe get to see a little bit of Matt Watley, who is not really a prospect, but had a 0 ERA in like 3 or 4 pitching appearances last year for AA Frisco. Just an interesting guy. But Sam Huff is 25 years old, a former top prospect. So far, a week into the season, he has a 607 OPS, does not have a home run just yet. AAA started a little bit sooner than everybody else. They've been going for about a week. Everybody else started on Thursday night, so there has been a little bit of movement there. But for me, there's a few other guys that I really like in the bullpen. This bullpen is full of guys who, like, maybe they're going to be big league relievers, maybe they're not. Chase Lee, I really like, I think, the most of all these guys. You also have Lucas Jacobson, who is a big, tall lefty who touches 97 and has a true splitter. He is 6'5", 190 pounds, and a big big dude. Good to see Kyle Cody, who is back in AAA. Joe Barlow is in AAA for now until he regains his velocity. Then I think he will end up taking maybe Ian Kennedy's spot in the pen. There's just a lot of interesting guys, including the crafty sinker righty Zach Kent, the side armor. Chase Lee. I don't know why I said Zach Kent. Zach Kent is not a side armor, but I do think he will spend time at the major league level this year. But Chase Lee is the righty, 6 foot 170 pounds out of the University of Alabama, Roll Tide to the Viper. Chase Lee, the 24-year-old, has had real up and down moments within his professional career. Was really excellent in 2021. Had bits and spurts where he was fantastic for most of his time in AA last year. Then Round Rock was a little bit of a harder challenge. Had a few months where he was good, a few months where he was really bad, and those overall kind of skewed the numbers. Only got one appearance so far this year, an inning and a third where he did allow a run, so his ERA is at 6.75. But still, it happens. Did have a pair of strikeouts of those 4 outs, and I think he is a really interesting righty. We'll see if we get to see him in the big league pen at some point this year. I'd imagine so. I lean more likely than not. But the biggest storyline for me in AAA, most of these guys I kind of know what they are. Blaine Krim is a first baseman who's also a non-top 30 guy who I think is really interesting. Davis Wenzel is another utility infield guy. I think he's a little bit behind Jonathan Ornelas, maybe a little bit better defensively, but I trust Ornelas' bat a little bit more. Foscue, I feel like most of these players, these top 30 guys that are on this roster, I kind of know who they are. The only one who I'm not quite sure about is Cole Winn. He's a former first-round pick last year. I don't want to say it was a case of the yips, but it was definitely a rough go for him. He is a guy who had really good command in the past. It also had random seasons where it just kind of blew up. He was part of the deload program, the only survivor without Tommy John surgery to go through that deload program. But this year it's been a little bit of a mixed bag for him so far. Last year it's just a really bad walk problem, got lit up, some hard contact, the 15th overall pick in the 2018 draft. He's still very young. He breezed through the system pretty quickly until he got to AAA. Even though he did miss time because of the COVID pandemic, he really was pretty advanced from the time that the Rangers drafted him, and that was one of the things that they really, really liked about him. So far, he's pitched 2 games. One of those was a start. He's pitched 7 innings, 10 strikeouts, and a 7.71 ERA. The walk problem is still very much a thing. Has allowed 3 home runs so far and 8 walks in those 7 innings. I'm just a little worried. It's only 2 games, but still, I really want to know what Cole Winn is, and if he's not at least a back end starter, that's going to be a real bummer for this pitching development crew, which, I mean, the Rangers have a lot of pitching and a whole lot of question marks about all of them. Last year, I was feeling much better about them, especially heading into the season with the talent pool they had. But now I definitely have some questions about them. Coming up, we're going to get into a little bit more about AAA and some of those guys there, what I'm expecting from them, and the AA roster and on down through this minor league system. But first, this episode is brought to you by SoRare. Our new sponsor, SoRare, is a revolutionary fantasy baseball game and marketplace transforming fans into owners with officially licensed digital cards featuring players from across all 30 MLB teams. Unlike other fantasy baseball platforms, SoRare managers truly own their fantasy experience, collecting, buying, selling, and competing with player cards against global opponents to win epic rewards. Win or lose, you still own your cards. There is no cost to play. Plus, the more you win, the more you advance, collecting increasingly powerful cards and accessing next-level competitions and rewards. SoRare MLB games happen twice weekly in a span, a 3 to 4 day cycle at the end of a game week. SoRare MLB managers who rank at or near the top of their leaderboards win a variety of rewards, which can include SoRare scarcity cards, game tickets, merchandise, signed jerseys, and VIP experiences like meeting MLB stars. Prizes may vary depending on the competition, so head to SoRare.com/lockedon. That's spelled SORARE.com to draft your team of free players, set your lineup, and start competing today to win epic rewards. Again, that's SORARE.com/lockedon to start playing today. Now, this AAA roster, I think, is really, really interesting. One of the things that was most interesting about it is that Dustin Harris was not on it initially. It looked like he was going to be on it, but then he was bumped back to AA. But again, most of those position players kind of know exactly what they are. If Ornelas sustains what he did last year he had an OPS over 800 while playing a legitimate shortstop, second base, third base, center field, left field, right field. Might have played a little bit of first base. I don't know if he played both corner outfield spots, but if you can hold down center field, then I'm pretty sure you can hold down a corner. But basically, he's doing kind of what Josh Smith is doing, except he's right-handed. But that type of player is extremely valuable to have as your 24th, 25th man on your roster. And if, Josh Smith's injury, which thankfully wasn't too bad, he is back in the lineup today, Friday, as I'm recording this. Actually, game's probably starting right now as I'm saying this. But if something were to happen to him, not that they already have Ezekiel Duran, who I don't think is necessarily a true shortstop. Jonathan Ornelas is a true shortstop, and I like his game. But even though he's the highest of my top 30 guys on this team, Justin Foscue is the one that I am least confident about making a decent-sized impact on the Major League team this year. Maybe Cole Winn gets a start or two. Maybe Cody Bradford, I think, would be really interesting in a spot start or two. I don't know if he's going to get significant time up there. Jonathan Ornelas, I've already talked about how versatile he is. Zach Kemp maybe in the bullpen, same with Yuri Rodriguez. But Justin Foscue is a guy who's just got to hit gangbusters, and he doesn't really have a position. He plays second base. Maybe he'll play left field. They've put him at third base, which I think is where he played a little bit in college. But the guy's just got to hit like crap and hopefully drive up that trade value. I think he can. We've shown when he gets hot, he gets absolutely scalding hot. So we'll see if that can end up paying dividends for him, and the Rangers can trade him at some peak value. But again, it is, for me, most of what I'm watching is figuring out what Cole Winn is this year. The other guys, I feel pretty good about knowing who they are, and I think they're going to be big leaguers if they're not already at some point this year. Actually, I guess just Yeri, that of these top 30 guys, that's already a big leaguer. But still, interesting group in AAA, but not as interesting as the group in AA. This is was ranked the most interesting team by MLB Pipeline of all 120 affiliated teams. The Frisco Roughriders were ranked the most interesting, most watchable team in minor league baseball, and I'll tell you why. They've got a crap ton of my top 30 guys, well, just everyone's top 30 guys, and not just guys in the middle or the bottom of the top 30. They got more than half of their guys. They have 10 total guys who are in my top 30, and 6 of them are in the top 10. That's starting with Evan Carter, who's my number 1 overall prospect in this system, including the number 3 and number 4. Both right-handed pitchers, Owen White and Jack Leiter. Owen White is number 3. Leiter is number 4. Luis Angel Acuna, who is my number 5 prospect. Aaron Zavala, who's not on there right now. He is still hurt. He is probably going to be out until, I think, around May-ish is when we're going to see him. But when he comes back, he's my number 6 prospect. And he's almost definitely going to start his season back in AA. Had a little bit of time there. About mid-season was when he was promoted, and I really liked what I saw from him. Also have the number 9 prospect, Dustin Harris, who I just talked about, who I thought was going to be in AAA, but he was hurt. He had a fine season last year, not a great one. It was okay. He still needs some more seasoning at AA, both to play in the outfield, because the AAA outfield is pretty stacked. You also have Clint Frazier up there, so he is going to get quite a few at-bats, as well as I thought Zeke Duran was going to be in AAA to get some more at-bats there, but he's on the big league team because he can help this big league team win, and so the Rangers decided to promote him up there. Otherwise, that would have been really interesting. Also, Zeke Duran is graduated from my prospect list, as is Josh Smith. Both those guys were... thought maybe they'd be in AAA this year, but they're not. Who is in the minor leagues is, going back to the list, 13. We have Thomas Sagisi. I swear to God, I had this last year, and I think I've lost it. Sagasi, that's what it is. Thomas Sagasi at number 13, who's probably going to be playing a lot of third base. He's played a little bit of shortstop and a little bit of second, but I think third base is his long-term home. Was really impressed with the short stint I saw him in AA last year. Was able to be on that team that took this Frisco Roughriders team to the Texas League Championship. Also, we have number 16 prospect Tekoa Roby, who is one of the 2020 draftees who didn't have the best numbers-wise season last year, but I think he was significantly better than those numbers showed. He is 22 years old, actually. No, I think he's 21. He turns 22 in September. Yes, 21 years old, does not turn 22 until September. The 3rd round pick in that 2020 draft that is looking like an absolute steal. The number 1 prospect in the system is was the 2nd round pick that year. Justin Foscue, who's my number 10 prospect in the system, was the 1st round pick. And rounds 4 and 5, I think, will end up being maybe okay guys, but rounds 1, 2, and 3 are looking like absolute steals. Takeo Roby is going to be the number 3 starter in this rotation, and the 16th overall prospect in my system, which I might even be a little too low on him. Ryan Garcia, a former second-round pick, is my number 20 prospect. He is also going to be in this rotation, a guy who has missed a lot of time due to injury, but has been blazing through the system. He is a little bit on the older side. He was drafted out of UCLA, out of college. He is 25 years old, but last year was a really, really solid year for him. A 1.94 ERA in 14 games. 13 of those were starts. 74 strikeouts in 56 and 2/3 innings. He's a guy who, again, he would be a lot higher if he wasn't so much older and there wasn't so much wear and tear on him, but he is a number 20 prospect in the system. So 4 guys that are top 20, almost the entire starting rotation is filled with top 30 guys. And then number 22, Trevor Hauver, the last top 30 guy in my system. He is a first baseman slash corner outfielder, third left field, I should say. But basically a DH only type of guy who is Mr. 3 true outcomes, a little bit like Aaron Zavala, except Aaron Zavala, I trust his defense a little bit more in a corner outfield spot to be a legitimate left fielder. Not going to be anything special out there, but I think he'll be serviceable. But Hauver, I like his bat. I like a lot of the advanced numbers that I've seen about him. He walks at a very, very good rate, a very disciplined hitter, and also has some pretty solid power. But there's a lot of guys. Basically, this entire infield is going to be top 30 guys. I think we're going to see a lot of Hauver at first base. Luis Angel Acuna is pretty much going to be the everyday shortstop. I think he could be an everyday shortstop in the big leagues. Granted, the Rangers kind of have one right now signed for the next this year and 8 more years after it, that I don't think is going to be playing shortstop into his age 38 season or whatever his last year of the contract is. Maybe it's Luis Angel Acuna that's going to be the everyday shortstop that takes over for him, but he is a guy who makes a whole lot of contact. His brother is having a fantastic season, a former, I can't remember if MVP or MVP candidate, just multi-time All-Star, but Luis Angel Acuna is no slouch himself. He is a guy who just lasers baseballs all over the field, plays a legitimate shortstop. Thomas Saggese is a guy who I really, really liked last year, took some huge steps forward, has just kind of jumped through the system. Like if Evan Carter wasn't doing what he was doing, Thomas Saggese might be the guy who, he was, that was the 5th round pick in that 2020 draft. It was Thomas Saggese. I knew he was around then, but both those guys were drafted out of high school, and both of them are 20 years old and already in AA and have won a AA championship. I really, really like what I've seen from him. Last year, 103 games and 867 OPS, a guy who just makes very good at bats, very good contact, and plays a pretty solid defense at third base. Had 15 home runs last year, and as an 18-year-old playing full season ball in 2021, he had 10 home runs. That is not a thing you see a whole lot. An OPS of 835 that year while playing mostly second and third base. I think third base is where he's going to stick. Just having a long-term home, I think, will be good for him. But this roster is freaking loaded. I mean, your top 3 pitchers, you have guys that are all should be top 100 guys. Well, I guess your top 2 or should be top 100 guys in most rankings, because some people aren't super high on Jack Leiter. He's not, but I think that he's deserving. And same with Owen White. It's incredible that you have your top 3 of those guys. And I think that with a good season, Takeo Roby could jump way up here in this top 10, depending on some promotions, depending on how some things break. I really like what I've seen from him. He is a really interesting storyline to watch. Basically, all of those top 3 pitchers are going to be really interesting to watch. And obviously, Evan Carter. Like, it's really hard to pick a top storyline. Coming up, we're going to look at some interesting non-top 30 guys on this Frisco Roughrider team, because it's not just stacked with those 10 top 30 guys. It is completely loaded. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained as well. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Now, like I said, this Frisco Roughriders roster is absolutely freaking loaded, and there are a lot of interesting non-top 30 guys, including Kellen Strom. Not the guy you thought I was going to start with, but Kellen Strom is a guy who definitely deserves some love. He had a really good year last year. He's a little bit on the older side, but still a solid year. Guy who is 25 years old, not too old, but just not like peak prospect status. He's drafted in the 5th round out of San Jose State in 2019. He plays a legitimate center field, had a really good offensive season last year, an OPS of 799, 10 home runs, and 16 doubles for him, an on base of 392. I was really impressed with that while still showing some power and playing, like I said, a legitimate center field. I don't know that he's going to be an all-star. I think he will end up making his major league debut at some point, but definitely a guy to keep an eye on. Easy to overlook him with Evan Carter, probably manning center field every day, except for the few days we might see Leody Taveras playing center field. But still, this is a really, really interesting group, as well as guys coming out of the pen. Antoine Kelly, who I'm not sure if he's going to start or if he's going to be a reliever. He was the only guy remaining in that Matt Bush trade. He is a guy who is a lefty, who has got some primo stuff and absolutely no freaking idea where it's going. A guy who they did not protect on their 40-man roster, who I thought might get taken up in that Rule 5 draft. They ended up losing Mason Englert instead, which is a real freaking bummer. And I really wish that Mason Englert was here. Maybe he would end up being in AAA. They did not protect him, so they lost him in the Rule 5 draft to the Tigers. Maybe they still end up getting him back. But there are some other interesting guys in the pen, including Alex Speas. Speaking of guys who throw primo stuff and have no freaking idea where it's going, Alex Speas is most definitely that guy. He has got stuff that touches up to 102 and not really a clue where it's going. If he can figure out where it's going, then boy howdy, he is going to be a really good back-end reliever, a former 2nd-round pick in 2016. I believe he spent last year away from baseball. I think he was a high school coach, if I remember that correctly. I'm pretty sure I was hearing that on the Rangers on Deck podcast, a really solid podcast by The Ticket. But yeah, he is not somebody who necessarily super knows where his stuff is going. But if he ever figures that out, boy howdy, look out, because it is absolutely nasty. And Mark Church is another guy, probably one of the nastiest sliders in the system, if not the nastiest. That pitch alone is going to make him a major league reliever someday. And one last guy, catcher David Garcia, just an interesting guy. He's kind of gone back and forth of being maybe a top prospect, maybe not. I don't really know what to make of him. He's a 23-year-old switch hitting catcher who last year had a 655 OPS in across AA, as well as a little bit of time in the Arizona Rookie League. Obviously did a lot better there than he did in Frisco. But still, don't really know exactly what to make of him. Had a really nice season in short season Spokane in 2019. Was not super great in his first full season in Hickory in 2021. And last year he was fine. I don't know. I don't really know what to make of him, but I think he's interesting and definitely a guy worth keeping an eye on. I mean, if you're going down the list of basically it feels like almost everybody on this roster is someone that is at the very least interesting and worth keeping an eye on. But we were already 23 minutes into this podcast, and I still haven't even gotten to the high A and low A guys, so I think I'm going to break that off as another bonus podcast and put that out on Saturday. So that is going to do it for this edition of Locked On Rangers. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. Like I said, I'll be back tomorrow, maybe early morning, afternoon. We'll see what time that podcast ends up getting posted. But thank you all so much for your second. Let's go check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball. Win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy draft strategies. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you all so much for listening and subscribing, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.